as a public speaker, it may be hard for you to imagine that I am an introvert, but I am. And I'll share my story with you. This is me, second from the right, in Canada, in Vancouver, British Columbia, in 2017. I was asked to be on a leadership panel at the Toastmasters International Convention there. I really enjoyed that. There were 2,400 people in attendance at this particular event. And at that very moment that the picture was taken, I was in my glory. I was having a ball. But here I am 2 years later in June 2018 at an event that was hosted by Nunez Community College. It was a nonprofit setup where we introduced ourselves to the members of Leadership St. Bernard, a program that was started in the St. Bernard Parish area. This is a picture of my husband, AJ, and I working the Chalmette Toastmasters booth at the nonprofit event. And the young lady with us is Allison, who we met that day. And she was a member of the class of 2018 of Leadership St. Bernard. Now, during this presentation, I was having a ball. During this event, I was miserable. And you're probably wondering why. There were only 45 people total in attendance at the event at Nunez that day. And as I mentioned, at this event, there were over 2,400 people. And so as an introvert, you might wonder why I was struggling with this event when I didn't struggle with the one where there were over 2,400. And so as I go through the slides tonight, I'll explain that a little bit more and tell you why I'm so afraid of networking and how I've managed to not necessarily conquer my fears, but deal with them. And I hope that you'll learn something from it that will help you with networking as well. So to get an idea of why I struggle, I will share with you that it's because of my personality type. It's strictly a thing about my personality and some of the traits that I have. And so if you've never thought about your personality and how that plays into networking, is something that you need to do. You definitely need to consider how that works for you. One of the things that I've heard about introverted people, or people especially who work in STEM types of fields, science, technology, engineering, math, is that while you might be really intelligent and analytical, curious, logical, results oriented, you are also dogmatic, authoritative, reserved, introverted, and less social, which makes it really difficult to navigate the networking waters. And so these are really not horrible qualities, but it makes it difficult to do the networking that you need to do. And you need to consider how your personality plays a role into that. One of the things that I did was I took a DISC assessment. So for those of you who have never heard of DISC, I'm sure most of you have, and even if you have, maybe you haven't heard lately. I'm just going to really briefly touch on DISC and remind you what those 4 personality types include. So the DISC is an assessment that you can take that puts you in one of these categories primarily. Sometimes you touch on several or on 2 primarily. D is for dominance. If you checked most of the boxes under D, you are adventuresome and competitive. You're the person that's going to climb Mount Everest or jump out of an airplane, be a member of the Dauntless group in the Hunger Games. You're going to be a rock star at networking. So we'll give that a thumbs up, right? But if you are an I, you're more influential. And you are probably charming and confident. You're probably a great person to take networking because you're inspirational and you'll inspire the introvert in me to move forward and meet new people. You yourself will be a good networker too, in some cases, because you're optimistic. So even if you're not enjoying yourself Or even if you're not crazy about networking, you'll probably enjoy it because you're optimistic and you're enthusiastic and you're a good person to have along. If you're an S, that means you're steady. And steady people are friendly and amiable. They want everybody to love them. They're sincere, understanding, but they like a stable environment. And then finally, C, which is compliance. You may have heard it referred to as conscientious. Also, I've heard that the C can be referred to as conscientious. You're accurate, analytical, you're a rule follower. So you're the person that's going to want to get the job done, and you're the person that is always on time. You're compliant. Now, how does DISC play into my personality? Well, you saw that AJ was at that event with me. This is my husband, AJ. We've been married for 37 years, and we dated for 2 years prior to getting married. In fact, today, 37 years ago today, was when I met my husband. And we are alike in a lot of ways. We like the same types of people. We like the same kinds of movies somewhat. I tend to be a Christmas Hallmark Channel movie sometimes, and he likes a lot of the adventurous movies, but I enjoy those as well. And we somewhat blend our styles. But personality-wise, we're like the yin and the yang. In fact, his doctor said that the other day. He said, I love you guys. Y'all are like the yin and the yang. You work together to make it happen. And that's why it's so helpful when I bring him to a networking event with me. Because when I'm terrified, he drags me around the room and introduces me to everybody. You see, when AJ took the DISC assessment, he was a high D. And by high D, I mean that he checked every single box under the D. Every single one. Every single one. When I took the DISC assessment, I checked one box under D, and the rest of the boxes had a sprinkling, with most of them being an S, which, if you recall, was steady. So AJ was a D, dominant. I was an S, steady. Now, what that means as far as networking goes is that AJ's ideal environment was the challenging one, the exciting one, the non-routine. Whereas Tina, I like stable and predictable. So thinking back to those two events that I told you about that in contrast were so different, they were both events where I was asked to come and speak about Toastmasters. I love Toastmasters. You would think that both events would be similar. But in the leadership panel, I was speaking to an audience of 2,400 that were mostly Toastmasters themselves. So they all loved Toastmasters with me, and we had that common bond. Another thing about that 2,400 people event was that the closest any person in the audience could get to me was 15 feet, because that was how far the front row was from the stage. I also had an opportunity to somewhat prepare for that event. I didn't know what questions the moderator was going to ask, but I had been to a similar panel at previous conventions, and so I had a pretty good idea of what to expect. I knew he was going to ask me questions related to my role as the district director of District 68 Toastmasters. I knew he was going to ask me about my experiences as a leader. Now, the event at Nunez Community College was quite different. It was 45 people that mostly had no knowledge of Toastmasters, and I was there to tell them about Toastmasters and try to convince them to join. First of all, I'm not a salesperson at all, and so that thought was just put me over the edge. But the other thing was, I had to deal with these people asking me questions face to face. I only had to deal with about half of them because AJ handled the other half. So it was roughly 20 people. But guys, I had to talk to these people face to face and speak to like 20 people and answer questions that I had no idea they were going to ask, and talk about things that I wasn't expecting them to bring up about Toastmasters. Let me just tell you, it was an hour of excruciating pain. I hated it. And I was doing the same exact thing that I had done at the event for 2400. I was talking about Toastmasters. So you would have thought that it wouldn't have been a big deal, but it was. And that's why AJ was there. I was so thankful that he was there to hold my hand and protect me from those vicious people. Now, I am not so dumb that I think networking is not important. As hard as it is for me, I recognize that networking is extremely important. And so some of the reasons that it's important, in case you don't know, is because it provides you a lot of resources. And I have a great story I want to share with you about that a little bit later. Networking will introduce you to people who can give you the information and other resources you need. You definitely want to network, no matter how painful it is. It also gives you an opportunity for professional growth that you might not otherwise have. So definitely you want to look for opportunities there, and you might even find that you can get a mentor from the group of people that you network with. That's always good to have. Career advancement too is something that's important in networking. If you happen to lose your job, God forbid, you want to know a lot of people who work in the same profession as you so that you have opportunities that come up when they hear that you're looking. And so those are some reasons that it's important to network, but how do you get past the fear? How do you even start to network? Well, I've learned some things. One thing that I learned was that I was going to the wrong types of networking events. And so it's really important for you to do your homework. Just like I did when I spoke at the conference where there were 2,400 people, I did my homework. I said, what types of questions might they ask me? Well, when I did my homework for networking, I considered what types of events would be best for me. And if you have no idea where to start with that, think about what types of social events are you comfortable at and what types make you uncomfortable. If you are comfortable at weddings where there's a reception and people walk around serving food and you're standing up mostly and walking around the room, then you might be comfortable at a similar networking event where there's finger food and somebody's passing a tray and you're walking around the room, working the room. But if you're more comfortable at a sit-down meal at a wedding where there are 6 people at your table and you're only speaking to those 6 people, then perhaps you need to think about a networking event where you're sitting at a table eating breakfast or lunch or dinner, and consider that. The other thing that you have to think about is the networking event one that's going to help me with my career? If you are a person who works for a company that sells only to other companies, you're probably not going to want to go to a networking event where it's mostly individuals. You want to go to people who, you want to go to an event where there are other businesses you can sell to. It's not that you're there for the purpose to sell, but you do want to meet the right people that you can eventually work with or do business with. The next thing you need to consider is that Shakespeare gave us some really good advice. To thine own self be true. You need to consider, when do you function best? If you're a morning person, I would not suggest going to a nighttime networking event. Trust me, I've tried it. I am more of a morning person, and I got involved with networking after work and tried those events. They were not for me. A lot of them were in the bar scene, and I am not a bar person. I don't typically drink a lot, but I also just don't go to bars. And there were a lot of them in the French Quarter. They were always in the evening at 7 or 8 at night. And that is not when I function the best. I'm a morning person. So you need to consider that. But you also need to consider in your schedule, where do you place these events? So if you decide that you're a morning person and you want to go to a morning networking event, don't put it on a morning that you know you have to be back in the office for a lunch meeting that's usually important, or that you have a huge assignment due at noon that day. That would be a crisis. Also keep in mind that if you're an introvert, chances are that this networking that you're doing is going to suck the life out of you. And so you want to make sure that you allow time beforehand to prepare yourself and allow time afterward, that you'll have some downtime. If possible, if you're a person who is good in the evening and you are able to go to a networking event where you can take the next day off of work, go for it. Because you're probably going to need the rest. You'll probably be exhausted and you won't know why. And it's just because keeping your emotional level up while you're networking, if you're an introvert, is really difficult. And it's hard work and it wears you out. The next thing that you consider is, who do you want to bring with you to your networking event? Team up with friends. I mentioned earlier that you could bring an I person with you. An influential person is good to bring with you to a networking event. Somebody who is real inspirational and happy all the time. They're good people to bring because they lift your spirits and they help your energy raise up. But you can also go to a networking event with somebody else who's just as introverted as you, and you can challenge each other to work the room and to do what's right, to just get around and get to know people. Sometimes bringing a person with you, like my husband, who is a high D and can drag you around and introduce you, will get you started. For me, when I go to a networking event and AJ's with me, he is not afraid of anything. So he will walk up to people he's never met before and say, hey, my name is AJ Guillot, and this is my wife, Tina. And we'll let the other person respond. And then he says, Tina's a trainer and a speaker. And he gets the conversation started for me. And then I'm able to take over after that. I have this thing where once I get my foot in the door, I'm able to take it and run with it. But other than that, I'm hesitant. So that first step is the hardest for me, and it might be the same for you. You have to kind of play it by ear and get used to it. Networking takes practice. But the other great thing about teaming up with friends is that you can team up with 2 or 3 people or maybe even more and do a networking event yourself. So the good thing about that is that you can choose the time you're going to do it. You can choose what type of event you're going to do, and you will probably be more satisfied with the outcome because you've geared it toward your own schedule and your own likes and dislikes and your own group of people, your own types of employment or your own networking needs. And so it's a lot of fun to do that. I will tell you as an aside, if you're trying to build a networking event and you can team up with at least 5 or 6 other people, it's a lot easier to promote it. You tell 2 friends, they tell 2 friends, and so on and so on. And before you know it, you have a really good event. Even if it's a socially oriented event, it can turn into a networking thing. Every year, we have a Christmas party at our house. I'm dreading that we probably won't be able to have it this year. But we have this huge Christmas party at our house, and we invite everybody we know. We invite all our friends from church. We invite all our friends from Toastmasters and from all the different things that we know. My husband invites his friends that are in the umpire and what are they called? Referee. The umpires and the referees that he works with, he invites everybody. We invite our neighbors. And it turns into a networking party. Although one year my husband tried to recruit my sister to join Toastmasters and that didn't go over so well. But it is an opportunity for you to connect with people that you might not otherwise connect with. And so even if it's a social event, look at it as a networking opportunity. Now, how do you cope? How do you cope with the actual networking process itself? You've decided what types of events you're going to go to. You've decided when you'll go to those events and who you'll bring with you. How do you cope with the actual process? Well, it's easy. You choose somebody as a role model. You observe what they do. You plan your approach, and you engage with others. So I'm going to explain this process to you. I actually went to a networking event for Toastmasters a couple of years ago. It was a huge event. It was sponsored by the New Orleans Chamber of Commerce and was held at the New Orleans Convention Center. Toastmasters was a member, our district was a member of the Chamber of Commerce at that time. And so we had a table for, I think, 6 or 8 people. And our goal was to walk around the room and meet as many people as we could and just introduce them to Toastmasters. Let them know we had so many clubs in the area and we'd love to have them at a meeting. But it was so funny because the majority of the people at our table were introverts. We teamed up, we paired up. I teamed up with one of the girls at the table who was also an introvert, and she and I came up with a plan. Well, when I was a district director in Toastmasters, we had our top 3 people. I was the district director. Right below me was the program quality director, and below him was our club growth director. Well, our program quality director was an awesome guy. Some of you may know him. He's been to some of the ASQ meetings and even spoken a few. His name is Mohammed Qayyum. He's an IT guru, super nice guy, and a networking rock star. I mean, this guy knows how to network. And it was always embarrassing for me because Mohammed and I would go to networking events, or not even networking events. We'd go to Toastmasters events, and he would work the room. He would introduce himself to everybody in the room. And here I am as the district director trying to hide if I could. But I watched Mohammed and I thought, if he can do it, so can I. So I used him as my role model. And I watched what he did. And I thought, well, I can't do what Mohammed does. I'm going to have to change his plan a little bit and just use it. So I planned my own approach. And when you're planning your own approach, what you have to first do is obviously introduce yourself to the other person. And then you have to open the door to find out who they are and what they do. But you don't want to just make it so simple as to say, what's your name and what do you do? My husband always says that networking is easy because if you've ever watched Animal House, all you have to do is walk up and say, hey, AJ Guillot, darn glad to meet you. Like the guys in Animal House. I don't agree. I think that's insincere. So you want to be sincere in your approach. And the best way to show how sincere you are is introduce yourself, but then turn the floor over to them. Let them tell you who they are. Let them tell you a little about themselves. Now, the danger is, what if they're an introvert too? Boy, would that be awkward, right? So the best thing to do is ask them a question that may be designed to help you get the information you need. Well, remember I told you that Vanessa and I teamed up at that New Orleans Chamber event. What we did was we decided we would ask them how often did they attend networking events. So we walked up to people that were sitting at tables that we assumed were introverts just like us because they weren't working the room. And we would go up to the table and I would say, hi, I'm Tina Guillot, and Vanessa would introduce herself, and we would say, have you ever been to one of these networking events before? And typically they would kind of hold their head down, and because they were introverts like us. And usually we would get some type of response like they didn't like networking events, or they tried to avoid them, or whatever. And we'd say, well, would ask them a little bit more about themselves. Well, I see that you're sitting at the Humana table. You work for Humana Hospital or Humana Health? Yes, I work for Humana Health. What field do you work in? Human resources. Aha, human resources. So that you find yourself in a situation where you have to communicate a lot. If you don't like networking, that must be hard, right? And then we go on to say, we are at the Toastmasters table today. We belong to District 68 Toastmasters. And so we're here just trying to introduce ourselves to everyone and let you know that there are 33 clubs in the New Orleans area. So if you would ever like to visit a Toastmasters club, we would love to have you. Here's our card. Just go to the website on our card and look for the Find a Club link. And we would love to see you at one of our next meetings. We hope you enjoy the networking event. And it was always successful. We met a lot of nice people. Many of them gave us their cards and we followed up with an email. So after you engage, it's important to also follow up. And don't try to sell them anything. Just follow up and say, hey, it was really nice meeting you at the networking event. Would love to see you at a Toastmasters meeting. In case you lost my card, here's the link. And send them the link again. So now, you know how to decide what events to go to. You know how to decide when to go to those events, who you should bring with you, and also how to cope with the whole event process or the whole networking process. But what did you do during COVID? Well, I find that networking during COVID is even better for people like us who are introverts. It's an awesome opportunity, and you can say, man, I really wish I could go to networking events in person, but we have to do everything online right now. So you can act like you're really a networking rock star, but you're settling for the whole online thing. And you don't always have to wear pants. I might or might not be wearing flip-flops right now. I'll let y'all wonder about that. But I'll give you some suggestions right now of how you can network online. The first is that social media is actually a great place to network. So Facebook and LinkedIn are my favorites. I don't know about you guys, and I apologize that I'm not involving you more, but the way the screen is set up, I can't see everybody. So I am trying to share as much as possible. Facebook and LinkedIn are really good for that. One of the reasons that Facebook and LinkedIn are so good is because they have groups. If you've ever belonged to a Facebook group, you might not like that idea because a lot of Facebook groups are not necessarily geared toward networking, but it's more how many people can we get in this group so we can keep tagging them in posts. And I don't know about you, but that makes me crazy. But I have some Facebook groups that I absolutely love. And I mentioned earlier that I wanted to share some information about how you can do that. I belong to a Facebook group called Church Media Managers. I am the media director at my church on staff part-time. So in addition to being a speaker and a trainer, I work for my church part-time as the media director. Thank you for that. And Jeff, who's on the call here, is actually a member of my church. We are, with COVID now, in a whole new world. And so when the whole thing with COVID started and we had to switch to online services, for us, we were somewhat prepared. We already had a YouTube channel. We had already been live streaming, but the quality of our live stream was not good at all. So in order to bring our members a quality product, we switched completely to pre-recorded services. Well, as you can imagine, that's a lot of work, recording and editing and then uploading and getting that out to everyone. And it was becoming a bit stressful for me as the media director in particular. So we wanted to switch to online streaming to make it a little easier and also to help our members feel more connected. The Facebook group that I belonged to was incredible. Not only did they answer questions I had, but they actually helped me choose equipment and software. It was amazing. And I had never thought of that group as a network until then. And so that is the story that I wanted to share to you about how you can meet people online that will be great resources to you. And they will also train you and help you. I've learned so much. My son said to me the other day something about Twitch. And my husband said, "You mean the DJ on Ellen?" And I said, "No, he means the Twitch platform that you can use for streaming and blah, blah, blah." And my son was so impressed that I knew anything about it. I honestly don't know if I said the right thing, but he was impressed that I had ever heard of Twitch. And I've learned about Twitch from the Facebook group. So you can use these groups to learn about what you do. What is it you do? There is a speakers group on LinkedIn that I have learned so much about. There's also a speakers group on LinkedIn where you can share opportunities to speak at conventions and conferences, and that's always helpful. So look for groups that have to do with your line of work. If you're a real estate agent, look for a real estate agents group. If you are, you never know, you might pass on listings to each other. If you are a writer, join a writers group on Facebook or LinkedIn. Perfect way to network, also a great way to learn. Now you can join other groups that typically meet in person, Toastmasters, wink, wink, and you can meet online with Toastmasters right now. You can meet online with ASQ. You can meet online with Rotary Club. right now, whereas before you had to drive to a meeting and maybe there wasn't one close to you. So this is a great opportunity for you to network with other groups without actually having to go anywhere. And again, you don't have to wear pants. There are training sessions online too. And training sessions, while they aren't network opportunities, actually are, right? How many times have you been in a training where you've met other people? I met some of the coolest people I know who have actually traded some speaking opportunities with me in an online improv class. And I found out about the improv class from a girl that I'm connected with on, what is the thing that they're trying to get rid of? Because it's, I'm forgetting the name of it. The social media they're trying to get rid of because of China.
TikTok.
TikTok, thank you. I joined TikTok because I thought my sister wanted me to, and then I found out it was just a joke. But I joined TikTok, found out about an improv class, went to the improv class, and met some of the coolest people I ever want to meet in an improv class. So training sessions are a great way to meet people and network. You can also go to virtual conventions. Right now, there are a lot of huge organizations that are doing virtual conventions because you can't meet in person. And because they're offering them only virtually, they are doing them dirt cheap and sometimes free. Toastmasters International normally charges about $500 as a convention fee. And by the time you add travel and other expenses, you're looking at a couple of $1,000s to attend a conference. They did their complete international convention for this year free. And there were some amazing speakers. It was the best convention I've ever been to. I didn't have to leave my living room. And I had flip-flops on the entire time, no heels for me. The other thing you can do is actually look for networking events that are online. Just go to Eventbrite or to meetup.com and look for networking events online. And there are specifically network events that you can actually, I wanted to say forcefully, that's not the word, especially, that's the word to say to introverts, intentionally network. So for example, I went to one where we all just logged into Zoom and just introduced ourselves to each other. We played a little bit of a sharing game and did some breakouts in rooms. I also know that networking after work, the one that I mentioned earlier that most does their events at bars, they were doing all of their events online. I'm not sure if they're still doing that, but they were at one point. So a lot of these networking organizations, BNI, they're having their meetings online right now. So it might be a great opportunity to try out some of the BNI groups that you maybe didn't want to go to before because it was too far. Great opportunity for you to do so without driving. And just a reminder that networking is not about selling. It's about meeting and connecting with other people. So before I move on, I just want to give you an opportunity, since I wasn't able to really see everybody all at one time, to ask some questions. I'll spread my screen out. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to try to answer those for you. You can just unmute and holler. No? No questions? Okay, I'm going to recap just briefly for you before we close.
We're too shy. We're all introverts.
That's the truth. I hear you. I hear you. Well, let me just encourage you that even though you're an introvert, you can do it. You just have to ask yourself some questions. What types of events are going to work for me? And remember, we thought of those as social events. So if you're comfortable in certain social environments, you'll probably be comfortable in similar networking environments. When should you go? You want to go at the times that are best for you, and you want to make sure that you allow time to prepare and recover. Then think about who are you going to take with you to these events. If it's an online event, you can bring anybody you want, right? You can invite your cousins who live in Nebraska. And finally, oops, my clicker died. How will I approach it? Make sure that your approach is genuine. Make sure you start out by introducing yourself, allowing the other person you're speaking with to tell some things about themselves. you want to make sure that you have an opportunity to connect with them in the way that shows them what you do. And then you want to follow up later on. That's my presentation for tonight. I'm Tina Guillot. You can find me at tinaguillot.com. And I'm so thankful I got to network with you tonight, even though we're all introverts. Catherine?
Yes, thank you,
Thank you,
Tina.
Tina.